War Legion Modern Conflict Podcast. All right, everyone, welcome to our first show.
Yay!
Yes, we
Yay.
are War Legion Modern Conflict Podcast, and for those of you who don't know us yet, yeah, we're a circle of friends that we're really into war history, right, guys?
Of course,
Are you
yes.
guys are
Yes.
really into war history?
We are addicted to history, our history. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yes, and basically this is our first episode, and honestly, I don't know how I feel right now. We've been trying to do this before today, but I still have butterflies in my stomach.
Oh, do you want to go to the toilet?
I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, let's try our best. What about you guys? How do you feel right now? This is our first episode. Are you guys excited, or I hope
Mixed
you guys
feelings.
are excited?
We have
Let's have
mixed
Marco. How do you
feelings.
feel right now, Marco?
Good.
Feel good? All right. Dark Adam, how do you feel, man?
I feel nervous and excited at the same time. That is
Nervous
all.
and excited at the same time. All right. Barca, the speculator.
Very mixed. Mixed. As in, we're using the what's this? That blender. My stomach is in a blender.
Oh,
And of course, the anti-social scientist. How do you feel right now, dude?
well, I'm becoming more sociable now. I'm very excited
Mhm.
because our topic today is really relevant, especially in relation to what has been going on nowadays in Southwest Asia. Do you know where is Southwest Asia?
No idea. Where's that?
Yeah,
I only
I'm
know Middle
actually
East.
well, I'm actually referring to the area known as the Middle East. Yes,
I see.
right.
So
So
sometimes it's called Southwest.
that's right, because if you look at the geographical map, it is located in the southwest eastern portion of the map. And I don't want to use the word Middle East because it's too Eurocentric and it's very political. So I'll call it with its proper name, Southwest Asia. And yeah, it's very good to talk about this region. So I'm really, really excited.
Wow, that's very informative, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think someone said something. Barca?
It just occurred to me that it's Southwest, and then I think I skipped the Central Asia part, where there are a lot of stands, and then yeah, Southwest makes sense in a way because we're used to being or that region is used to being called the Middle East. It doesn't really click to a certain degree because it's in the middle and it's also in the east.
Right.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah, right.
So I
right.
think from an Asian point of view, yeah, we could refer to it as Southwest.
Southwest. What about Marco? Do you have the same thought? Like, we can call it Southwest?
Man,
Middle East?
I could not even tell which direction is southwest or northwest. The only thing I know is Northwest Airlines.
Northwest Airlines.
Northwest Airlines.
Anyway,
That's a cool
guys,
name,
that's
man.
that's not our topic for today. This is our first episode, and all of us agree that we're gonna have this topic, Arab-Israeli war. And of course, yeah, we have our own reasons why we chose this topic. Some of you guys who are listening right now might ask, like, "Yo, why don't you choose the recent or the current war between Russia and Ukraine?" But for some reason, yeah, we decided to choose this topic. Anti-socialist scientist, why did we choose this topic? What's the importance of this Arab-Israeli war?
Before I answer that question, I would like to introduce myself first. You're right, I'm the antisocial scientist. And Yeah, because I didn't study hard when I was studying social science in my university years. Actually, yeah, seriously, we study this conflict because if you compare this conflict to other modern conflicts such as the Korean War, um, certainly it would pale in comparison compared to those in terms of military strategy, in terms of equipment, logistics, and so on. But yes, we study this Arab-Israeli war because we would like to answer three questions,
Right.
three very important questions. And
Right.
number one, we would answer why there is a conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis in Southwest Asia. And second, why there's an ongoing trouble between the Gazans, the people in the West Bank, the Palestinians, and the Israelis at
Mhm.
present, of course. And number three, why there are millions of Palestinian refugees scattered around Southwest Asian regions such as Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. So we have to answer these questions using our podcast, Arab-Israeli War.
Right, right. Those are just few reasons mentioned by the anti-social scientists. But yeah, I do apologize, guys. I forgot to. Since this is our first time, I think it's very important that we introduce each one of us. So yes, I'd like to call out Marcus. So please give a brief introduction about yourself. Like, what specific aspect of war that you're really into?
Well, yeah, I'm Marco. So when it comes to history, generally I love history, but my forte really is more on military history, particularly in weapons, modern weapons, so basically 20th century, 21st century weaponry, and the strategies and tactics that they use that will be very decisive in that particular conflict, and of course the weapons they utilize that have a lasting impact in modern warfare. So that's where I come in.
It's basically about military weapons being used during
Yes.
the war.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And why we chose this topic? Do
Well,
you think people should know about this war?
yeah, definitely. One of the first reason why we choose this topic because the Arab-Israeli War 1948 is one of the first major wars after World War II, post
Right.
World War II. And second, the reason why we should, people should know about the Arab-Israeli War in 1948 because, in a modern sense, it is
Mhm.
the origin of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Arabs and the Palestinians. So, in order for us to understand in a modern perspective how come this conflict has been raging on for decades, we have to go back in 1948. Although some pundits would say, "Oh, the conflict went back further," but speaking on the topic, modern conflicts, the origin is the 1948 Arab-Israeli War.
And we should start from there, right? 1948, since
Yes,
we focus
objectively
more
speaking.
on modern wars.
Yeah, we should start 1948.
All right. Thank you so much, Marco the Narco. Just kidding. Would you call me?
Yeah.
Would that be okay if I call you Marco the Narco? It sounds
Yeah, yeah.
cool, man.
Yeah, it
No
looks
worries,
like a
Mr. V.
vigilante there.
Anyway, let's continue. Dark Adam, my man. Please tell people who you are and what aspect of war that you're really into.
Call me Dark Adam, and I'm specializing in ideology. So it means that I will
Wow.
gonna deep dive into the ideology of the people, their mindset, their culture, why
Mhm.
they're doing this, why they believe on this, and why everything about anything deep inside their mind
Mm-hmm.
So sit down and relax, and I will give you a tour guide to the dark side of human nature. That is all.
Right. There
Wow.
you go. Dark Adam. It's very exciting, man. It's related to psychology. And yeah, when I was a university student, my major was psychology. So maybe it's something that, you can both relate. And last but not the least, Barca. Come on, man. Tell people who you are. You're on mute.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Good.
Hi everyone, I'm Barca. I'm the newest addition to this group. Well, make correction, a last minute addition to this group since I just practically joined yesterday. We were. I was looking forward to the first podcast, but then they invited me to be part of the podcast itself. So
Right, right.
my
Welcome.
role here, since all aspects of warfare is already taken by my colleagues here, I decided that I'd just ask the alternative question. So an alternative mindset, if that's the case. So
Right.
that is my role as the speculator.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow.
Ask the questions of what if.
Right, right.
But of course, we have to limit ourselves because
Right.
there's a lot we can say about this. Uh, I'm sure my colleagues will be talking a lot about it. And they have a lot to
Now we're
share.
quite nervous. Actually, you know,
Yeah,
we're
a lot
in
to
for a
share.
surprise.
Well, we're just glad to have you, man, because
Yeah,
I
thank you
think
for having me on
it
board.
adds more color to this podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And
Okay.
do you think we need to explain why we're wearing masks right now? What do you
No,
think?
that's a secret. We are gonna tell the reasons in our next podcast. Stay tuned, guys.
All right. Yes. But me personally, the reason why I totally agree why, because at first we didn't have this idea, and then for some reason Dark Adam suggested this idea, and I was like, yeah, I'm 100% agree with it because I don't want to show my ugliness.
Okay.
That's
But
just
anyway,
a shallow
so-
reason. We have a deep reason why we're wearing masks, actually. Right?
Right.
So-
right.
Just don't reveal yourselves now.
Yes. But I think Marco, people can still see his handsomeness.
His true colors are shining through.
Yeah, yeah. Like your eyes and nose, man. People can still recognize you, I guess.
Anyway, this is the first podcast. They'll probably forget him in the second podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
I'm
right.
sure we'll be upgrading our looks as the podcast goes. For
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
very
so
true.
that we
As
can
we
improve-
progress. Hmm.
Yeah, it's gonna
make
be-
it practical.
It's
Right
gonna
now
be the
we're like
evolution of man.
right now we're like charcoal black and white, and then there's green. So it's like matcha cookies and cream. So yeah, or
Anyway, so let's
Yeah.
dive in, okay? Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Arab-Israeli war, a very interesting war. War happened after World War II. So, of course, every war has its beginning, right? There are some reasons why this war happened in the first place. So, for Arab-Israeli war, how did this particular war actually begin in the first place? Anti-social scientist.
Well,
Tell
yeah,
us
that's
about this.
that's a very long story. Maybe it will take hours if we discuss the history of the Arab-Israeli war. So I just want to make the story short. I just start a year ago. I mean, a year before the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Is that okay?
Mhm. Sure thing. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, we have to remember that there was a civil war between the Palestinians and the Jews in the area that is we now called Israel. This area was once considered as Mandate Palestine. It was occupied by the British after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in World War One. So after World War One, the British took over uh, the Holy Land or Palestine, and since they started to take over, they have this policy of divide and conquer. Because of this
Mhm.
policy on divide and conquer, the peaceful Jewish, original Jewish settlers, or I mean the original Jewish inhabitants of Palestine, um, began to have a conflict with the Arabs. One of the reasons of this conflict is because there are waves of immigration of Israeli, I mean European Jews coming from Europe. So
Right.
yes, well, we have to remember that during the defeat of the Palestinian Arabs in the civil war in 1947, it angered the Arab League. So the Arab League is actually a group of countries: Syria, Egypt. We have also Jordan,
Mhm.
and these countries essentially hated the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. So when the Palestinians were defeated during the civil war between the Jews, at that time the British, they had a hard time managing the situation. They essentially could not do a good job in mediating the conflict. So as a
Right.
result, they handed over the problem to the United Nations, and the United Nations made a proposal for a two-state solution. Well,
Mhm.
the British probably they were so, should I say, they were playing safe. They washed their hands like Pontius Pilate. They said, okay, we get out of this problem. Let's bring this problem to the United Nations. And the United Nations said, okay, let's divide this land, Palestinian and Israeli or Jewish. But unfortunately, the Palestinian Arabs disagree with it, and as well as the Arab neighbors of Palestine, they disagree with it. So by the time in May 14, 1948, that was the announcement of the creation of the state of Israel. Many Arabs were angry about that, and the day after, that's the time that the British left Palestine. That's when the Arab neighbors, the Arab League, invaded Israel, or the new state of Israel, and that's the start
Mhm.
of the Arab-Israeli War.
Wow. British was like, oh, fuck it, I can't fix this problem. Hey, UN, can you fix this problem for me?
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, Marco, anything that you could add about what anti-social scientists mentioned?
Well, pretty much the antisocial scientists really, explain it in detail. But yeah,
Mm.
in a military perspective, after the UN submitted the two-state solution, the conflict started immediately afterwards, wherein the Palestinians rejected this one, and as a result, firefights erupted around the settlements. But at that time, there were the towns in the Palestine were divided to Jews and Palestinians, and yeah,
Mhm.
they rejected it, and a fighting broke out between the Jews and the Palestinians. Then eventually, the Jews are winning in their conflict or in this civil war in Palestine, and the Arab countries, the newly independent Arab countries like Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Transjordan, uh, thinking that the the Jews are about to win, they decided to intervene
Right.
the war. So they sent initially, before sending in the regular forces, they sent in some irregular forces. This is the Arab region, which we will discuss later, and that's how the war expanded, basically in a military perspective.
Right. Right. So basically, at first, it was a conflict between the Palestine and the Israeli, right?
Yes,
Then
the-
later on, other Arab nations like Syria, Lebanon, Jordan,
yeah,
they joined along with Palestine and fought
yeah,
against Israeli.
yeah. Not we at that time we don't call really the Jews as Israeli, because take note, at that stage there is no Israeli state, so we simply call them
At that
Jews.
time,
Yeah, that time,
not.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
but they decided to intervene because they don't want, the Israelis winning, getting more land at the past time. But of course, which we'll discuss later, these countries also have ulterior motives of their own why they join the conflict.
yeah, speaking of motives, what were basically the motives of these countries?
Well, for one, although the official statement of the Arab League is that they supported the Palestinians, that they should have their own state, and but in actuality, they don't really believe the Palestinians are capable of ruling themselves. So some of them, for example, Egypt, they they join the conflict because well, basically some British the British intelligence, some members of it also pushed the Egyptians to join the war. But at the same time, they have their own objective. They want to grab the southern portion of Palestine for themselves. At the same
Right.
time, the reason why they join, because they don't like the Jordanians, going in first, because they're also competing which one will champion for the Arab cause. So they don't like, they let the Jordanians come in first, and the rest of the Arab world might think, oh, the Jordanians are the champions of the for the Arabs. So they don't want that the Jordanians will claim that one, and
Mm,
so that's why they join in and they grab more territory at the same time, increase their prestige and influence in the region. For Jordan, for Transjordan, they want to annex the eastern part of Israel. That includes, I think, the eastern part of Jerusalem. And as
right.
for Syria, they want to integrate parts of Palestine into the greater Syria, pan Syria regime. And the Lebanese, they have their own agenda that they want to take portions of northern Israel. So that's the ulterior motive. Although they can always support the Palestinians, but there were self interests, going on among these
Yeah.
Arab governments.
So it's like, the idea of supporting the Palestine is just a facade. That the behind that facade is they have their motives as well.
Yeah, precisely. They have their
Uh,
own
we can blame
objectives.
King Farouk and King Abdullah on that.
Why? Why?
Yeah,
Why
well,
you can blame
it's a
them?
quarrel between these two people. I mean, they're subjects that just follow them. They were the authoritarian regimes at the time. King Abdullah of Jordan and King Farouk of Egypt. They were the main rivals in the Arab League. But I don't want to get into details about that. Let's ask other people. What's their thoughts on it? Yeah.
Okay, Dark Adam. Um, I would really like to ask this question to you.
Yes.
Why is that these Arab nations, the Arab League, hated so much the Israeli? Why is that? Could you explain to our listeners why there's so much
Hmm.
hate towards these people?
Well, in my opinion, this is actually all started thousands of years ago, even before the Arab-Israeli War.
Mm.
In my opinion, the Arab-Israeli War is the repeat of history, the stories in the Bible. Because if you
It's
look
like
at
a
the stories
repeat.
in the Bible, yeah, it's a repeat of history.
Hmm.
Because just like the stories in the Bible, the enemies of Israel, of the ancient Israel, is also the same people today. Like for example, the Moabites, the Jebusites, the Egyptian, those are the people in the Bible. But today, in modern times, they are now called the Jordanian, the Saudi, the
Right.
Iranians, the Iraqi, the Egyptian, the Lebanese. But they are the same people from the Bible. So what we are
Right.
witnessing right now in the Arab-Israeli war is the modern version of that war in the Bible. But the difference is this: in the Bible, the Jews are fighting against the pagans, and today the Jews are fighting against the Muslims. But but this hate increased even further, uh, especially during the time of the before the Arab-Israeli war, when the Jewish people from Europe who have a Western ideology decided to bring back the Jewish land, and then the Muslims who already live in this area, who
Right.
already who has a mindset that this is a Muslim land, they feel that what the Jewish are doing is a form of invasion. So they have to protect
In
their
their point
land.
of view.
Yes, against the Jewish.
Mm.
And if you think about it, it sounds legitimate that they have to protect against this invader. But you must understand that the way how the Muslims view the Jewish people is totally different from other people. The way the Muslims see them, it's like sometimes they even associate the Jewish people as the devil.
Right.
There is the culture in the Middle East that the Jewish people are magical people who can curse you and give you diseases, something like that. So
Yeah, but
the,
for Christians, they view
yes,
Israelis
yes,
like,
for
the chosen ones, right?
for the Christians and also the Jewish people, they view Israel and its people, the Jewish people, as the holy people or the people of God. So if you're
Mm.
gonna ask a Christian, they have a very different perspective when it comes to the Jewish people because Israel, the land itself, and its people it's the land of the prophets, it's the land of Jesus Christ, it's the land of the Bible. But for the Muslims, they see Israel as a country that is ruled by the Jewish people as a land of Satan. Because the reason why is that because the entire Middle East, including this land over here,
Mm.
is a Muslim land. It's supposed to be a Muslim land and it should be ruled by Muslims only, not by
Right.
Christians, not by a Jewish president, not any non-Muslim leaders.
Hmm.
Yes, that's why they're having conflict.
I see. I
But
think Barca
overall,
has something to say about that.
I like to ask Dark Adam what his opinion uh, on why the Israelis chose that time to return to Israel. Is there anything that suggests that in their history, in their uh, well, maybe because they got tired of their diaspora, but I don't know. Is there anything that suggests that that time, the late 1940s, the post World War, the post Second World War, to suggest that the it was high time for the Israelis to go back to Israel? Uh, is,
you mean so let's make your question very simple. So you're
hmm.
asking me what is the justification why they have to go back to Israel, something like
Yeah,
that.
but I know not
At that
that
particular
time,
year.
the timing.
The
I'm talking
timing.
about the timing. Yeah. I know there's lots of justifications for that, and we could go on for that. But for that time, why choose that time?
Oh, I think it's all started after the Holocaust.
Ah, okay. So the
Yeah, because
Holocaust did play a part.
yes, was the trigger, and then the reason why the Holocaust was the trigger because the Jewish people are wondering if we are the people of God, why God abandoned us, something like that. And then
Mm.
and then what the Jewish people did, what they read the Bible, they start from Genesis, they start the story of Genesis. God meet Abraham, and then Abraham promised to Abraham that the promised land, which is Israel, that if his children will be inside Israel, God will protect them. God will gonna give them security. You know, good stuff. The land of milk and honey. That was what God promised to Abraham and his children. So when the Jewish people realized that in Europe, that the reason why they got killed in Nazi Germany is because Germany is not the promised land. God is not in Germany. So they decided to bring back the Jewish land so that they could have protection.
Mm.
You know, because there's another fear that there might be another Hitler that will gonna persecute the Jewish people again. It may not be in Germany, it could be in other countries. Like for example in Russia, for example, they have the gulags. The gulags is basically the Russian version of the Holocaust, you know. So because of that
Right.
fear, and then there's a connection also in the Bible, they decided to bring back the Jewish land. Again, this is the mindset of the Zionist mentality because if you think about it, the Jewish people they can simply go to to Antarctica or to South Pole or somewhere elsewhere
Anywhere.
to
Yeah,
build.
they could
Yeah,
reestablish
anywhere.
themselves anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anywhere. Yeah, they could
Mm.
establish anywhere, but they decided Israel because this is the promised land from God, and
Mm.
this is again connected to what God promised to Abraham that I am your God. I will protect your people as long as they are inside this land that I've given to them. And that
Right.
is the entire narrative of the Bible. It's there's a song about it, there's a poem about it, there's
Mm.
metaphors about it, about the Mount Zion, which is God, that will protect Israel and we're gonna nurture Israel.
So in
Right.
short,
Right.
But
Dark Adam, there's no specific date or a prophecy hinting the telling the Jewish people to reestablish themselves to Israel in the late 1940s. Is does that make any sense? Do they
uh,
did they have that kind of knowledge or pre knowledge, or was
I'm
that
not
just a collective consensus from the from the Jewish people that it was time for them to go back?
Yeah. Some
I'm
sort
not
of
even
sign or
Yeah,
I'm not really certain about the calendar,
yeah,
but
uh
there's a similar event in the Bible.
yeah. That's
The
true. That's
Jewish
true.
people,
I read that
yeah,
also.
similar story, yeah. And they were also
Uh,
gonna do the same cycle. Like for example, the temple was destroyed and then they rebuilt the temple, and then the temple was destroyed and then they built the temple again. Right now, what is
right.
not yet happening is the rebuilding of the temple of Jerusalem, which is the temple of Solomon.
uh,
Yeah. So basically,
I
what's happening
see.
in Israel is basically a repeat of history, like a modern, very modern interpretation. We're
Modern
actually
version, right?
witnessing, yeah, the modern version. We're actually witnessing what is the story in the Bible
mhm.
Mm.
in a modern setting.
Right, right.
Yes, yes, very similar. The difference is that this time it's a Jewish state. It's no longer
Yeah,
the kingdom of Israel. Before it was a kingdom.
yeah.
Mm.
True,
But
But
if
true.
going
you,
back to the question, basically,
but yes,
the reason why these Arab nations hated Israel
Yeah,
Jews before, it's because of the religion aspect, right?
uh,
In a nutshell, right?
there's a deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
But it will gonna take me like 5 hours of podcast or discussion. So I decided to for those who want to know more details about this, give us
Right.
100,000 likes, okay, in YouTube.
Right,
wow.
guys. Please put your comments below if you want Dark Adam to elaborate
Ex-
or discuss further on
Expound.
this
Yeah.
topic. Yeah, please
Yes.
feel free to put it in the comment section. But anyway, guys, we only have 2 minutes left, so let's take a break for a while, and then let's talk about like who really won the war and what strategies both parties used during that time, and how these strategies were effective. And also, we will talk about why uh, Arab League used this particular strategy, and then why the Jewish people used this type of strategy. So let's tackle that after our 2 minute break. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so guys, please tune in, and we will discuss more about this topic, Arab-Israeli war. So stay tuned. All right, and we're back. So we'll continue discussing about this topic, guys. Arab-Israeli war. Me, as someone who doesn't really know much about this war, yeah, I learned something already from these guys. So let's continue. First question, or not really a question, but apparently, tell me if you guys agree with me. Apparently, Israeli won that war, right? Can we all agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
Soundly, as in historically.
overall victory.
Very-
Not
And-
100%, but yeah.
Not 100%. Not 100%. Wow. Let's talk
discard.
about that later. Okay, not 100%, but definitely, probably they won around like 90% or 80%, around that.
78% for me.
70%. Okay. At that time, I totally believe that. Should I say totally believe? I'm not sure, but I think that time, if we put it like in a boxing, it was like the Arab League was like heavyweight, and the Israeli or the Jewish people that time, they were like maybe middleweight. It's like, it's a fight between David and Goliath, correct? We can put it that way, right?
Well, probably we put it that way at the beginning, but maybe in round 6, Israel put on steroids and doing some, some muscle enhancers and toppled
The-
Goliath.
the underdog became a rabid dog
Yeah,
Yeah.
to bite the asses of the Arabs.
But I would really like to throw this question to Marco, because he's the weapons specialist and strategist. But man, how did the Israeli or the Jewish people won that war at that time, despite the fact that they came from the Holocaust, and yeah, that was really tough for them. And now here comes a new challenge for them to face, which is to win a war against very established already Arab nations. But how did they win the war? That really surprised me.
Well, there were really lots of factors, Mr. H. But I think one of them is their determination. I'll go into details. Okay, so I cannot say that the Israeli have a regular army compared to their Arab counterparts who already have established armies. But for one is that one unit in particular, the Haganah, which later became the core foundation of the much later Israeli Defense Force, were actually trained by the British.
Haganah
So-
or Haganah? How do you say?
Haganah. Haganah.
Haganah. Okay.
Yeah. They were trained by the British, and they saw action in World War II in the Battle of El Alamein and throughout the North African campaign. So basically, they are how should I say this? Professional soldiers. They have properly trained officers, so they're well led basically. And also, on part of the Jews is that after suffering from the Holocaust, they have this drive that if they allow the Arabs to beat them, it will be a second Holocaust for them. Because before the war escalated, there were already a lot of rhetorics amongst the Arab countries. Oh, the Jewish state should not exist and everything. So it gave them a strong motivation, a will to fight.
Right,
And-
that's given. That's given because
Yeah.
considering the situation that they had gone through. But what specific strategy they used?
Well, for one, we have what we call the kibbutz system, wherein
Right.
basically it originated as a farming community, which the Jews have been using this system for generation. But they convert this kibbutz system into war footing. So basically, it's a self-contained Jewish community wherein they are self-sufficient not just in food but in weapons. For example, there's this one town, small town, wherein in that the school in that town they converted it into an arms factory. And since
Right.
they lack heavy weapons, they built this 120 millimeter Davidska mortar. In a military sense, it's not a very effective weapon. Actually it's a very terrible weapon. But when you fire this Davidska mortar, when it explodes, it has a psychological impact. Wherein a very loud explosion that wherein some Arabs would think, oh, the Jews, they already have an atomic weapon. So
Mm.
it has a very big psychological impact, and of course the Jews maximize it. And also there were also reports wherein some settlements in these Jewish communities, they
Right.
manufacture British-made ammunition for their machine guns, and of course they use their extensive connections throughout Europe and the United States to procure weapons, particularly in Europe, wherein Jewish agents, and arms dealers, they buy European weapons, particularly from the Czech Republic, and use
Right.
it to supply the Israeli forces. So that's the general strategy of the Israeli forces, or the Jewish forces at that time.
Mm, mm,
Now,
mm.
in comparison to the Arabs, yes, you might think oh, the Arabs would definitely win because they have armor, they have an air force, they have artillery. But
Right.
you have to consider again the structure of the Arab armies. For one, even though they have all this weaponry, modern at that time, their system is not based on competence. It's based on loyalty. They have a tribal system wherein, for example, the leader for a particular battalion or division of that army will be led by a person wherein the king would assign a general or a colonel that is loyal to him, not by competence, because he would see that as a threat. And also, the typical Arab soldier, infantryman, is by Western standards, is not very well trained. He may know how to shoot a gun, but he lacks the initiative when confronted in a particular battle situation. For example, a platoon will be ordered to capture this particular position. So he would stick to that point wherein he would really defend that position. And if the situation requires wherein you have to withdraw or regroup, if there are no orders from your superior, those soldiers they will just stay there and fight because they're not being ordered to. Sometimes if they will ask some clarification from their high command wherein if they could withdraw to the rear or something, their commanders would have to pass it on to their higher commanders, and the decision making is very long. By that time, the initiative is lost, and if you
No
compare that to
initiative at all,
if you compare that to the Jews, they are trained by the British, so basically they are trained to fight with initiative in mind. So you don't necessarily need to wait for your higher
The
commanders
command
to order you. You're given the freedom, the initiative to seize that moment to turn the tide of battle. So I think that's for me that's the biggest difference.
Right, right. Anti-social scientist. Can you, add something about what Marco said?
Well, thank you for pronouncing my name very clearly. The antisocial
Alright.
scientist.
It's
Yeah,
too long, man.
it's too long. So many syllables.
I need to learn. I need to learn how
Right.
to pronounce a name every time we have a podcast. The anti-social scientist. And I have
Right.
problem with my
So
S
hard.
right now. Maybe it's because of the mask.
I know. But it's okay. Anyway, yeah, actually, we have to count the international support that Israel received from other countries like the United States and the Soviet Union. In fact, Joseph Stalin became a staunch supporter of the creation of the State of Israel. So,
Right.
as a matter of fact, Stalin allowed shipment of airplanes through Czechoslovakia, warplanes which were originally used by the Germans, the Messerschmitt. They were modified so that they would be transported, or they could be transported to the state of Israel. But there was an armaments ban at that time, because the United States at that time, although the United States recognized the state of Israel in 1948, it was the Soviet Union which helped Israel at first. They sent in arms such as rifles, airplanes, and machine guns through Czechoslovakia. So thanks to the Soviet Union, it helped the Israelis bolster their defenses. And with regards to other countries such as Iran, Iran supported Israel because at that time Iran was not yet under the Shah.
Really?
It was
Iran was already a Muslim country at that time, and they supported Israel.
No, at that time Iran was still not under the communist Ayatollah communist. So at that time Iran was not yet a Muslim country or a Muslim state. We could not consider Iran at that time as a Muslim
At that time, I think.
Yeah, because it was ruled by the Shah, Shah Reza Pahlavi, and he was very supportive of Israel. In fact, he was one of the first countries to recognize Israeli independence. So, yeah, and they even exchanged delegates, diplomats during that time. So it was like a golden age between the relationship of Israel and Iran. And at that time, the Israeli government, it was dominated by socialist-leaning parties, the Mapam and Mapai. These were both left-wing parties of the Israeli government. Those were the major parties, and they were left-leaning. So Stalin believed, we have to support this country because their government, in fact, were dominated by socialist parties. And we also have to take into account the support of Turkey, because during the time of the Ottoman Empire, the Jewish people were friends of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire respected Jewish immigration to the Holy Land. So when Turkey was born, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire was the first Muslim majority state that recognized Israel as a nation. So these are very important aspects that somehow bolster the resources of Israel at the beginning of during the middle part of the Arab-Israeli war. It's so important. And
basically, Israeli was not alone that time.
It was not alone. And we have to also give credit to the Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, because he was very effective in managing his generals. He has very competent generals. For example, we have Moshe Dayan, the one with the eye patch. And we also have Yitzhak Rabin. Actually, Yitzhak Rabin became the Prime Minister of Israel also. And he really tried his best to have a peace deal with the Palestinians. And because of that, he was killed, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize. But anyway, Yitzhak Rabin, Moshe Dayan, they were very competent generals under David Ben-Gurion. And that's the reason why also the Haganah were very inspired to fight the invaders.
Right. Their leadership played a big role in that particular
Definitely,
war.
definitely. Because, there was even a coup d'etat. Like, one faction, we call it the Stern Gang, tried to launch a coup d'etat in the government. They bought some arms from the French. The French were about to deliver weapons, but David Ben-Gurion decided, okay, someone tried to betray us, they have to be destroyed. So the ship carrying weapons from France, which would supposed to be used in the coup d'etat, were bombed by the troops of David Ben Gurion. So that uprising didn't happen, and the Israeli government survived.
Right, right. Another fact that I remembered, I think it was Marco who mentioned this. Like, both parties were using the same weapons from the British. Correct?
Yeah, Marco said that.
Yeah, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
that in one of our talks before.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can you say it again? I forgot, man. I'm forgetful.
Who?
Yeah, yeah. How comes both parties were using same weapons from the British? I think one of the weapons that you mentioned before was the plane, the aircraft. Right?
Yeah, Spitfire.
How did it happen?
At first, at the start of the conflict, the Israelis never had, correct me, the Jews, they did not possess any aircraft. Now, let's start for the Egyptians. Before the Arab-Israeli War, particularly World War II, Egypt was part of the British Commonwealth, or it's a fancy name of the British Empire. And basically, after they gained their independence, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, when the British left the country, a lot of World War II era British equipment were given to these Arab forces. So they started the war with Spitfires and everything. Now, later in the war, when the Israelis were winning, they also acquired weapons from abroad. Although Rick mentioned earlier, or the anti-socialist scientist mentioned earlier, that they acquired Messerschmitt or S-199 aircraft from the Czechs. But later on, as the war progressed into a much more conventional conflict, the Jews were able to gain more support from other countries, and that includes the British. So they replaced these, very old machines even by 1948 standards with newer equipment, and one of them is the Spitfire Mark 9, one of the most effective fighter planes during 1943. So the British gave or I think they sold it to the Israelis, and they used the fighter planes against the Egyptians. And ironically, it's also the same main aircraft used by the Egyptian Air Force. So later in the war, there were lots of dogfights within Spitfires versus Spitfires. So same equipment, and it boils down to the combat experience of pilots, which goes to the Israelis.
Right.
Right.
It's very interesting, man. Okay, Dark Adam, I really want to ask this question to you, man, since you are the, how do I say, ideologist here, and you're into analyzing the mentality behind behavior or something like that. So basically, if you take a look at the strategies in terms of chain of command between the Israelis and the Arabs, there's a big difference, right? Why is that for the Arabs, they prefer loyalty over skills, wherein on the other hand, the Israelis, they choose a competent leader?
Depends from what do you mean by competence. Because
Yes,
what is
competence in terms of skills, like leadership skills, communication skills, handling
yes.
men, yeah.
Yes, that is the Western version of competence. But if we're talking about competence in the Middle East, it's all about loyalty, as what Marco says. But in my opinion, this is all started because of their culture. You must understand that the way how Arabs fight is different. I mean, totally different from the West, because they're using huge amount of numbers to attack a single country or a single town. Using swords, using bows and arrows. and then
Right.
they're also using ambush tactics as well in the desert. Now in the modern version, they cannot really do that because they're using tanks. So it's created a conflict of a fighting style when they're applying those Arabian desert style of fighting into modern style equipment like tanks, for example. So at the same time, the culture of the Arabs is that they prefer their leader something that is a tyrant because the tyrant leader they see the tyrant leader as a very strong leader, and they need a very strong leader in the desert because the desert is a very harsh environment. They want a leader that is strong, powerful, uh, something like borderline tyranny, tyrant. But the
Mm.
problem about this leader is that he is the tyrant leader in the desert. He's like playing a balancing act, you know, balancing
Right.
act that he will gonna pick someone who is loyal to him, but at the same time that is competent. But the problem is that if the soldier is let's just say very competent, like he's very skilled, the
Mm.
talent leader is afraid that
Smart.
someone will just smart that this leader, I mean this general, might gonna assassinate him or replace him. So
Mm.
by default, the Arab leaders, they pick more of the loyalty. Like they pick the more loyal people. It's because the reason why they pick the loyal people, it has nothing to do with dealing with the objective or fulfilling the mission. It's more about the safety of their leader.
Right. Right.
Yes, and this is now caused problems during the war because in the Israeli, they are much more united. The reason why they are much more united because of what happened during the Holocaust. That the Israeli they have the mindset that the only
Mm.
people that they can trust is only the Jewish people, regardless if you're from the Middle East, from America, from Europe, or from Africa. As long as you're Jewish, we are brothers. But in the
Right.
case of the Arabs, they don't think that way. They're more of thinking who is the more loyal to me, regardless of his
Mm.
skills. That is the ranking, the loyalty ranking. So
So
that's
that
why
means
the
like the one who's a good kiss, who's good in kissing ass.
yes, the way how they
So
pick,
be chosen.
yes, it's more of like, for example, they were gonna pick a man who is very good in tanks. So instead of analyzing the person if he has a
Yeah.
skill to use a tank or to use a gun, they were
Mm.
gonna pick him based on loyalty. So
Mm.
they
Mm. Mm.
yes,
Mm.
that's how they rank people. Oh, he's more loyal. Okay, I pick him. Oh, he's very good in guns. He's very good in tanks. He's a genius. Oh no 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 no. He might gonna replace me one day once he elevate his power. So
Right. Right. They might go against the leader, right?
yes, the Malagos leader. That's why if you notice the Arab style of leadership, it's not really about leadership. It's always about fear that they're afraid that someone might backstab them at the back and replace them.
Mm. Mm.
It's a culture in the desert. It is totally different from the Western style of leadership. But that is
Yeah.
all for now
Yeah.
because it will take time for me you know, to discuss about the cultures of the desert. But
Mm.
if you're interested about this topic, so give us 100,000 likes in YouTube.
Yeah. There you go, guys. The culture of the desert. I think that's also interesting. I think we should have a different podcast for that one.
Sure.
But again, if you guys are really interested, please put it on the comment section and give us how many likes, Dark Adam?
1 million.
100,000 likes. 100,000.
100,000 likes. Yes,
One
guys,
and then
please.
6 zeros.
If you have any suggestions about this podcast, yeah, you're free to give suggestions, guys. Again, we're just newbies here. We don't have any previous experience handling podcasts, so yes, go ahead. We're open. Okay. I want to ask this to everyone. What is the role of British in this war? Anti-social scientist. I want to go with you first.
Well, yeah, that is a very good question again. And as I mentioned a while ago, the British used this divide and conquer tactic, wherein they tried to made the Palestinians angry to the Jewish and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. So as a result of that divide and conquer policy or strategy, they were hated by both camps. But yeah, we have to remember that the British had a very big role. And in 1917, Sir Arthur Balfour, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, um, with a guidance of Lord Rothschild, who,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, had a Jewish ancestry and one of the richest men at the time, um, made a declaration that the Jewish people will have their own homeland in what we called as the land of Palestine, and that was the beginning of the European Jewish immigration to the Holy Land. So we have by that time European Jewish, they started building settlements gradually in the state of Israel or the state of
Mm-hmm.
Palestine. But in World War II, I mean, prior, like a year before World War II, the Jewish immigration to Palestine significantly increased because, of course, the Jewish were so afraid that Nazism will kill them all. So, because of that, these Jewish European Jews immigrated uh, to Palestine in thousands, in hundreds of thousands, and suddenly the British decided, okay, let's stop this immigration because it would anger the Arab population in the area, which is true because the Arab population eventually launched a revolt against the British because they were so angry that the British allowed mass immigration of Jewish settlers. And ironically, also the British asked help from the Haganah to topple or to destroy that revolt launched by the Arab Palestinians. And this kind of hypocrisy of the British, like double standard, led to the conflict. It
Right.
Yeah. So the British had a very big role on that. Thanks to them, they actually spoiled that area of the world.
I see. All right, Marco.
Well, pretty much the anti-social scientists really, laid out the role of the British. I agree. Basic, behind the shadows, the British really played a big role.
Mm.
Yeah, to recap what the anti-social scientists said, they played a role in opening the floodgates, so what you might call it, for Jewish migration to Palestine. And at the same time, yes, they used divide and conquer, same thing that they did to India, wherein they used the Jewish population to suppress revolts from the Palestinian Arabs, and vice versa, they do the same. And of course, at the height of the war, yeah, they supported both sides basically. For one, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast,
Right.
the some elements of the British military intelligence really pushed the Egyptians to join the war. And like
Really?
for example, yeah, like they they really did their best to convince King Farouk of Egypt, oh, yeah,
Uh-huh.
you should go move in and invade or attack the southern part of Israel, so something like that.
Instigate.
Yeah, instigate basically.
Right.
And also at the same time, the official British position, they supported the Transjordan government of King Abdullah, provided that he could. They said to the Transjordanians, you could take a portion of Palestine, the eastern part of Palestine, including eastern part of Jerusalem, provided you do not attack Jewish settlements. So that's how the British, played both sides, and of course, some British military officers also supported the Jewish cause, and yeah, British military officers and soldiers stationed in Palestine, they also saw it as an opportunity to make money. So they also sell weapons, like getting from their armories and selling these guns to local, selling these guns to local Jewish settlements to make a quick buck. So
Right.
so that's the basically the role of the British, just to sum it up everything.
Wow. What a role.
The hypocrite.
Yeah, right. The hypocrisy. I mean, yeah, it's hard to imagine, but it's not surprising because I think that's. I'm not sure if it's good to say this, but yeah, it's typical Western mentality when it comes to war. Because like, yeah, let's make war to earn money.
Uh,
But anyway, guys, we have 1 minute left, so let's have a break again, and then
Have a break.
yes.
Have a Kit Kat.
Oh, this commercial, I think Kit Kat should pay to us. So let's get back after 2 months. Sorry. 2 months.
Okay, let's do that.
2 months because we were banned on YouTube
All right.
for our content.
So let's get back after 2 minutes and let's
Yeah.
discuss further, okay? And see you guys. Please stay tuned for the listeners. Bye bye. All right, guys, and we're back. And yeah, it feels good, after I went to the toilet.
Wow. What did you do
We
there?
all went to the
Did
toilet.
you commit a crime?
Well, it was a long discussion we had before we took a break, and yeah, I was holding myself. I couldn't
really?
explode.
Wow, that was a bomb. It's like the bombing of East Jerusalem.
Al-Akbar.
But anyway, we're on our last part of the podcast, and what we're gonna do now is Barca will have some sort of hypothetical questions, and after that, yeah, we will ask like, what's really the impact of this war in this modern world? What's the importance? So. Yes, I'll give the floor to Barca, the spectator. No, speculator. For now.
Well,
You
well,
can change
we're-
the name,
We're also
not
spectating.
speculator.
We're also spectating here. Thank you, Mr. H.
Sure thing.
Gentlemen, I have at least two questions, speculative questions. The first being, is the British, in all their hypocritic glory, what's this? Did not help or did not aid the Israelis in this conflict. Do you think the Israelis would still win the war, knowing that the Brits were big hypocrites? Okay? Would that have galvanized them to win the war without British help, or would it have cost them the war instead against the Arabs? So let me start with Dark Adam. What would be the mindset of that kind of in that setting?
Adam.
About the setting of the people is, what was the question again?
If the British did not help the Israelis
That help the Israelis.
in that war, and then would it have galvanized them? Would it have strengthened them? Unified them further to win the war, or would it have cost them the war instead? Because of the absence of British aid in the conflict.
I think, in my opinion, the Israeli will win, but it will gonna take them years to win. And then I think the one factor here that I'm saying that, in my opinion, it's because of the military system of the Arabs is chaos. because number one reason, their leaders, they don't trust their generals, they don't trust their let's just say their captains, and again because they're afraid that these generals were gonna betray them. At the same time, the Arabs, they don't trust each other. Like for example, and the reason why they don't trust each other is because these Arab countries have different sects of Islam. Like for example, there's a Shia, there's a Sunni, there's a Sufi, the Ahmadiyya, Ismaili, whatever. And these Muslims, they see each other as enemies. They're not that united. Compared to the Jewish people, that they see everyone who are Jewish as Jewish people, regardless of your sect. So there is that the trust that solidifies their bond.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But in my opinion, they're still gonna win, but it may take them longer years to win without
Okay.
the aid of the British and other nations. But the reason why they win quickly is because of the aid of the British.
Uh, uh,
Yes.
okay. So it will just take them more time to win. How
Yes.
about Marco?
Oh,
Your turn, sir.
Wake up, Marco! Come on, man! What are you
Uh,
doing, man?
Well,
Well,
from the arms
You're
point of
thinking
view,
still about
it's a
business?
strategic
Come
point
on,
of
stay
view.
focused on
Wow.
this podcast.
Would
Yeah,
it,
basically, I would agree with with Dark Dad, I'm sorry, that, the Israelis would, I think the Israelis would still win because with all the advances in weaponry, even if you have possess the best weapons, it's just an equipment. What matters in the field is the infantry, the people within that equipment. So it's just like, a highly motivated. I mean, for example, I'll put one analysis. Okay, let's look at the Ukrainian war. In paper, the Russian army basically has every technological advantage over the Ukrainians at the beginning of the war. Numbers, the superiority in equipment, but how come the Russians suffered heavy casualties? How come they were not able to seize the field? It is
they even
because,
routed
again,
several times.
motivation. As I mentioned earlier,
It's the morale, right?
yeah, the Israeli, when the Jews fought this war, after hearing the rhetoric of the Arabs that, oh, we will drive the Jews into the sea, we will make sure that they will be their settlements, they will be erased from existence. All this rhetoric, and going back 4 years before, they were oppressed. 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust. So put yourself in their shoes. You are in a cliff. So even though the British, or other countries will not support the Jews, but I believe they will fight to the very end because if they don't, then it probably they as a race, as a culture, they would cease to exist. Yes, it will take some time. It will probably take 10 years, it will take 15 years. Their regular forces might be defeated on the field. They will resort to guerrilla tactics, perhaps, like the Mujahideen did to the Soviet Union in the 1980s, or the Vietcongs did to the Americans. So I still believe that the strongest weapon is their motivation to win, because they're well more motivated than their Arab counterparts. No matter how, no matter how many tanks they possess, how many aircraft they possess. So that's my position.
Okay,
well
that's good. Last one, social scientist. What's the geopolitical scenario for that? That mess where the British isn't helping them at all.
You're on mute, social scientist.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the question again, Barca, was what was the specific question again?
What if the British didn't help in this conflict? Would that galvanize the Israelis to win the war, or would that instead cost them the war?
I think there are two ways to look at this one because, as I mentioned earlier, the British actually acted like Pontius Pilate at that time because they essentially did not support Israel fully. You have to remember that although they sell um, airplanes to Israel in the later part of the war, such as the Spitfires, the cost was so super expensive. It was really, really expensive. So as Marco pointed out, they tried to, that was war profiteering at the time on the side of the British. So even if the British were out of the picture, um, well, the Israelis would still win because they could still purchase weapons not from the British but from other countries. And we have to also consider how the Israelis trained their army. From the Haganah, in the later part of 1948, they actually made the official Israeli Defense Force. From 60,000 Jewish soldiers during the start of the war, it actually became 200,000. It swelled um, a couple of times, tens and hundreds of times. So, along with the number of trained soldiers, their equipment also were improved. They bought weapons from other countries. So, yeah, not just from the British, but also from other countries such as the Soviet Union. Even the French helped them as well.
Okay.
I see.
So let's go to now to the next or the penultimate speculative question. What if the Israelis lost the war? Would that encourage them to fight on, or would they just give up Israel? Just just when they already reestablished themselves in 1948. So, what's the mindset for that? Would they just give up, or would they try again until uh, they sought to reestablish themselves successfully in Israel? Okay, so let me go again and start with Dark Adam.
So you mean the question is, what if the
They
Israeli will
lost
they
the
lost?
war.
Yeah,
Will
if
they
the
have a
Arab League won the
motivation
war.
that
Will they
will?
continue? Will they still pursue the idea of getting Israel back from the Arabs, or would they just give up?
Uh, it depends from what is happening before that. Like for example, if there is no Holocaust, the outcome of that battle will be totally different because there is no motivation to do so.
Mhm.
But because of what happened in the Holocaust, they have seen the horrors, they've witnessed hell. For them, this war is not so much hell, they experience hell more than this. So for them, this is way more better, having war, having a weapon that they can fight back rather than they have no weapons, like in the Holocaust. So they create this comparison already. So assumingly they lost, let's just say two scenarios. One scenario is that the Holocaust never happened. In my opinion, they were gonna lose because there is no motivation behind it. They have not witnessed the horror of the Holocaust. So
Right,
there's no
right.
flashback. Yeah, like is this the way I live? Well, if we're gonna lose, for example, in the Holocaust, they've seen hell already. So in their mindset today, if Israel were gonna lose, there's gonna be another Holocaust part two.
Mhm.
So so they're focused on survival, as what Marco have stated a while ago. On the other hand, if there is no Holocaust, I think there will be no people who wants to, let's just say, revive the Jewish state. I think the Jewish will be divided because there is no justification. And then the reason why I'm saying this is because if you read in the Bible, what is happening in Germany, the Holocaust, the horrors of World War II, it's also happened during the time of the Bible. But they don't call it a Holocaust. They just call it like slavery,
Yeah.
the
Different
collapse of
form.
Israel. Yeah, different wording. But if you're gonna look at the details, it is almost similar to the Holocaust.
So
So it's,
okay.
yeah,
So in relevance to because of the recent history of what happened to them, you think they will still fight on in that conflict?
it
Because
depends also. It
of the
depends also if the Holocaust, if the
no,
Holocaust
no,
did
no,
happen
that's
and
fine.
then
Because of the Holocaust, would they still fight on even if they lost?
yes, they continue to fight on because for them, the Holocaust is much more hell compared to keep fighting on because at least
Ah,
in war they can fight back, but in the
Right.
okay.
Holocaust they cannot.
So
Makes
that is that
sense.
of so that would be enough, sir.
Yeah,
That Adam
it's
that
more better than that. Yeah, it's more better
okay.
than that rather than to give up because they experienced that they gave up during the Holocaust. There are books
Oh,
about it that there are Jewish people like their minds are already empty when inside the Holocaust. Like they just go into the gas chamber without even thinking, without fighting, without
mhm.
they're they're
They
they're
abandoned their faith.
they abandon their humanity, something like that. The horrors. That is more hell compared to keep fighting in the war. At least in the
Okay,
war they can win.
they fight back.
In the
Can
Holocaust they
defend.
already lost. Yes.
So they have a
But
fighting chance even if they lost
yes.
the
Yes,
first
even if they
conflict.
lost. Yes.
Okay, that's it's a relief to hear that also, sir. Because
Thank you very much.
that they would still fight on despite what happened to them in the past. And I
Yes.
think it would be also reassuring for all the Israelis back at that time that they would still continue
Yes.
to retake and revive Israel. Okay,
Right.
Yes.
so let's proceed to thank you for that, Dark Adam. Let's go on to Marco.
Well, pretty much Dark Adam said uh, credit what to give credit to whom it is due. Yeah, Dark Adam really laid out everything. But to further reinforce Dark Adam's position, and it's also my position, in a hypothetical scenario wherein the Jews or the Israelis lost the 1948 war, eh, I still believe the fighting would still continue. Maybe some of the Jewish people, depending on how the occupational forces treated the local Jewish population, probably some would, probably settle for a peaceful life, but pretty much a lot would still continue to fight in a form of guerrilla warfare. I mean, we have a number of examples for that. For example, the Indochina War, which we can connect to Vietnam War. Despite the superiority of arms of the French and later the Americans, as I mentioned earlier, it's their determination to really win.
Oh, that's true.
Will it will be a very decisive factor. So even if you kill probably thousands of Jews, you defeat their conventional forces, they will still continue to fight. So I don't think the 1948 war, even if they lost the conventional conflict, I think it will still drag on. Most likely, it will be an ongoing conflict up to the present, like what the Israelis and the Palestinians are doing now. It's just the 180-degree turn, wherein
Israelis
the Palestinians would be an established state, or the
state,
Arabs. Then the Israelis would be fighting guerrilla warfare. So I see that as a scenario. But again, if the Holocaust did not happen, yeah, I would agree with Dark Adam that yeah, the motivation would probably be much lesser on that
okay.
aspect.
Okay. Thank you for that, Sir Marco. Let's go with the social scientist. What do you think, sir? Would they still fight on, or would they just look for another state to settle it?
Well, yeah, certainly. Okay, so because the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, were defeated in 1948 war. That's the reason why there are millions of Palestinian refugees now. I think it would be the other way around. We have to remember that from 1947 to 1948, there were not only Palestinian refugees who fled from Palestine, but also Jewish refugees. And by the time the Israelis were defeated, I'm sure that there will be like an exodus, a repeat of what happened in the biblical times when there was an exodus of Jewish people out of Egypt. But it will be worse than that, because in 1947, the Israelis, actually the Jewish, killed a lot of Palestinian natives in the Palestinian land. Some of them committed atrocities against the Palestinian natives, and it would give the Arab League armies the chance to seek revenge against the Israelis. So there will probably be millions of, probably thousands of casualties, because at that time the Jewish did not number millions, only thousands of Jewish casualties, and there will be like massive immigration to other countries. And it's so hard for the Jewish too, because most of the countries surrounding the state of Israel are Muslim countries. They can only probably fled to Europe or to the United States
by sea.
Yeah,
That's what the Arabs vowed. If they would push them back to the sea.
well,
There's no-
actually there was no actual recorded statement that the Arab said that, but that was the Jewish narrative, actually, that the Arabs told them they will push back the sea. But granting that it is true, then it will probably happen. Like,
Because you said, sir, geographically, they're surrounded. by
that's correct.
Arabs.
That's correct.
And I mean, if there were Arabs as gallant as Saladin back then in the Crusades, that would offer
Like
peaceful transition, peaceful
right.
escort
But-
for them to the Western lands.
Yeah, but it's highly doubtful. I think
Uh,
this time the United Nations would probably intervene. This is the first task of the United Nations. The credibility of the United Nations would be challenged if they allow the atrocities against the Jewish population. So I would imagine probably a somehow similar event that happened between North Korea and South Korea. South Korea was defeated in the initial part of the Korean War, but the United Nations intervened. Probably there would be a scenario that the United Nations intervene, of course, with the leadership of the United States. The name is United Nations, but actually it's a bogus name, because the United States would probably be the head of that. Yeah.
So basically, with that being said, it was a failure of the United States when the UN took their first task, which is to give state to the Israel and the Palestinian, because it never worked. So basically, U.S.
Or
failed.
Yeah.
they could just likely claim that it's a work in progress.
That is correct, because the Iranians and the Turkish, they said at the beginning the two-state solution would never work, but probably Dark Adam would say one-state solution would also don't work. But at least the Iranians and the Turkish said that. Yeah. And yeah, it really didn't work. I mean, look at now.
Yeah.
And so ends our speculative discussion. I yield back the floor to Mr. H for
Thank you so much,
closing
Barca.
and conclusions.
Right. Those were beautiful questions.
Not really.
I was listening to these guys, like they were giving their answers, and it was like, wow, how I wish I could do the same thing. But promise, like social scientists, you mentioned about Korean War, which is a good thing, because that's gonna be our next topic.
That's right.
Pretty excited. To be honest, guys, I'm pretty excited about Korean War than this one. Of course, this is also
What are you
exciting,
talking about, Sir H? Anyway,
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because I don't have much background knowledge of this war, so probably that's the reason. But anyway, before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask this question to each one of you. What's really the impact of this 1948 war to what's happening today? Is there any, like for example, Marco? Was there any impact in terms of weaponry?
Well, to be honest, not really. I mean, compared to
Not
the
much.
later Arab-Israeli war, like the Yom Kippur War, wherein there was really an impact that really changed the way how wars are fought. With the 1948, to be honest, it's really just a backwater war in during that time period. It's not really something that that would really affect the geopolitics at that time.
Right.
So I would not say it's a war where it would change a lot of things at that time period. So the technology, well, basically World War Two. That's so World War Two left over. So there's not much in a technological or military perspective.
There's not much impact.
There's not much impact in the wider geopolitical situation at that time.
Mm. Right. The social scientist. What's the impact of the 1948 war in our world
Well,
today? I mean,
yeah, the conflict in 1948 created another conflict in the Six-Day War in 1976, and so on and so forth. So that is
and
one
probably
problem.
more in the future.
That's correct. Yeah, and well, we can say that thanks to the Arab-Israeli War, it created the state of Israel. To be more specific, in the middle of Muslim countries, and thanks also to the Arab-Israeli War, there are now 5 to 6 million refugees, Palestinian refugees to be exact. And thanks to the Arab-Israeli War, now the Israel is receiving millions of armed support from the United States, which angered the
true.
Arab neighbors, angered promoted the hatred of the Arabs towards the West. So I think
Yeah.
that was the impact. Those were the impact of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, in my opinion.
All right, very well said. Dark Adam. Same
Yes.
question then.
What was the
What's
impact?
yes, in different aspects.
I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest impact for me is that it's not really technology, it's not the geopolitics, and it's not the let's just say whatever in what is happening in Israel. In my opinion, the best thing what's happening here is that we are now witnessing the repeat and the history of Israel in the Bible in a modern version. Who are the enemies of the Israel in the Bible is also the same that is today. So we're now witnessing history live in the modern times. So I'm actually I really want to know what will Israel we're gonna reveal in the future.
Right.
So it's a very very interesting historical event that I'm witnessing right now.
I have a question to Dark Adam, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
do you think the Israelis now are creating history, or is it like a fulfillment, an accidental fulfillment of the early promise, the biblical promise?
I think
Yeah, very good
that,
question.
that yeah, that's a very good question if you think about it, and it's a very smart one too. But I think in my
Right.
opinion, they're doing both.
They're doing
Historical,
both,
yes, they're doing both
like fulfilling.
because
See.
Okay, go ahead.
yes, they're both fulfilling the prophecy at the same time. What is the repeating history? Because if you look at the enemies of Israel today, the enemies of Israel is not really Palestine. The enemy is literally the entire Arab nation. That is their whole enemy. In my opinion, the Palestinians are just weapons for propaganda to make
They're
the
being
Israeli,
used.
yeah, been used as a weapon for the Arabs. I mean, you must understand that the Arabian style of warfare is totally different from the Western style of warfare. I
Exactly.
mean, and the Arab style they have jihad, and then in jihad they use children for jihad, and then they give them promises that if you die for jihad, you're gonna go to Jannah, and you're gonna receive 72 houris. And then they told that to children, some children who are men around 7 years old, and then they're giving them preparations how to go to Jannah by practicing and wearing suicide vests. And you can even look at in the internet about this. You can see pictures of children wearing suicide vests. They're doing that because it's a guaranteed way to go to Jannah. Islam. And this is a tactic warfare that the Western people don't really understand
And
because
maybe
they're not.
it's something
Yeah.
that we can do in the next one of the topics in our next podcast.
Oh yes, I'm
Right,
glad
right,
that
right.
yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. H.
You know,
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr.
But-
H.
But
So
anyway,
for
yes.
those who want some more details about this, please subscribe and
Please,
give us
guys.
100,000 likes.
Yes. Dark Adam.
Yes.
Yes.
Please, guys, give us likes or comments, any suggestions, ideas. We're very open to it. Because, like, yeah, I mentioned earlier, we're newbies. So we're trying to improve gradually. So hopefully we'll be able to provide more entertaining podcast in the future. Right, guys?
yeah, next time there will be background music.
And additional
Hopefully
content.
we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. So that's our first episode, Arab-Israeli War, and I do hope you learned something from this discussion. And it helps you understand why there's still conflict going on between the Palestinians and the I mean the Palestinians and the Israelis. So yeah, we still hear news about this conflict on TV, on the internet. So there you go. So please, for the next topic, we're gonna go for Korean War, right?
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes. We look forward to it.
Korean War. If I'm not
Korean
mistaken,
War.
yeah, Marco is quite excited as well for this topic. Right, Marco?
We'll be playing K-pop songs also.
Okay. Please tell our listeners why we should listen to our podcast or watch our podcast about Korean War. Why do you think this is exciting? Because of K-pop?
Who are you asking?
We'll answer
Marco.
that question.
Marco?
I'm asking you,
Well,
Marco. Come on, man.
Okay. So basically, you should watch for Korean War because it for all those who wants to know what's the significance. It has a lot of significance there in technology, the
They made movies about that,
geopolitics,
right?
the culture. So
I
it's
think,
everything is
yeah.
connected. Yeah. So if you want to know how come the Korean Peninsula is divided, then you have
Yes.
definitely have to listen
Yes, that's
to
it.
the origin
Because-
of this conflict.
Yeah, because Korea was united before. There was no such thing as North or South Korea, right?
Yes.
But after World War II, it's divided. But anyway, guys, I'm talking too
Yeah,
much.
that's right. Yeah.
So it's something that, yeah, we are going to elaborate farther in our next podcast.
That's
So,
the one.
guys, anything that you want to say to our listeners?
Thank
Social
you,
scientists.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dark Adam.
Like, comment, subscribe to our channel. We are Legion.
War Legion.
Yeah.
Modern Combat.
Marco.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Yes, and Barca, the speculator. You shouldn't be a speculator, man. You should be one of the.
It's okay. Like and
Bye.
subscribe,
Watch
please. Like and
Yeah,
subscribe.
please like and
Please,
subscribe
please.
and have a wonderful day. Bye bye,
Report.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.